Welcome back, mathematicians. In this video, we are going to do more examples with the graphs of sine and cosine. In this case, actually, we're going to be given information about the graphs of sine and cosine and asked to come up with the equations that represent this information. We're starting with writing an equation of a cosine function with amplitude of 6 units and a period of 4. Let's start by writing the equation in its general form, which is y is equal to a times the cosine of omega times x. And I apologize in advance for my omega. My Greek letter omega, I know it looks very similar to a W and it's not very clean. Sorry about that. So let's go ahead and start by finding the value of a. What we know is that the amplitude is equal to the absolute value of a, which is equal to 6. Now we're not told any further information about whether there represents a reflection about the x-axis or not, so we don't know if a is positive or negative. As a result, a could be positive 6 or a could be negative 6. This means we're actually going to have two different equations that could represent this information. Let's now move on to the period. The formula for the period is t, which represents the period, is equal to the fundamental period of our trigonometric function. In this case, the fundamental period of cosine is 2 pi, and we divide that by omega. Now, what we know is the period, which is t. So we're going to replace the variable t with the value 4, and we're going to solve for omega. Now let's start by multiplying by omega to both sides, so we get 4 times omega is equal to 2 pi, and then we divide by 4 to both sides to finally get omega equal to pi over 2. So now we have all the information we truly need, except again, we actually have two potential values for a. So we will have two potential equations. Our first equation will be y is equal to 6 times the cosine of pi over 2 times x, or the second equation will be y is equal to negative 6 times the cosine of pi over 2 times x. Next, we're going to find an equation for the graph that's represented below. So the first thing we should do is identify which trigonometric function would be ideal to represent this graph. Now, in reality, we could choose either one, sine or cosine, but one of them is a little bit easier to work with than the other. So let's go ahead and analyze this more closely. If the graph intersects the y-axis at the origin, then sine is the ideal choice. If the graph intersects the y-axis at a minimum or maximum, and this would be the minimum, this would be the maximum, then cosine would be the ideal choice. Since we have identified that sine is the ideal choice, let's go ahead and write the equation in its general form. That would be y is equal to a times the sine of omega times x. And so our goal now is to find the value of a and the value of omega. Now a represents the amplitude, which in this case is going to be the distance, the vertical distance from the midline, which the midline is the x-axis, to the maximum or the minimum. So in this case, this distance is 2 units. So the absolute value of a is equal to 2. Now the other item that we need to consider, is there a reflection with respect to the x-axis? And the answer is yes. And the reason I know that is because when you start at the origin, the graph is continuing to decrease through the origin to a minimum. If it was a sine function without the reflection, it would actually be increasing through the origin to a maximum. So we know the value of a is equal to negative 2 because of that reflection. Next, let's find omega. To do that, we need to find the period. The period is the horizontal distance it takes to complete one cycle. Well, if one cycle starts on the origin 0, 0, then it would conclude at 10 pi over 3. So the horizontal distance it takes to complete one cycle would be 10 pi over 3 units. Since the formula for the period is t is equal to 2 pi divided by omega, and we know that the period is 10 pi over 3, that means 10 pi over 3 is equal to 2 pi divided by omega. Our goal is to solve for omega. To do that, we are going to cross multiply, and so what we get is 10 pi times omega is equal to 6 pi. We're now going to divide both sides by 10 pi, and reduce the fraction to get omega is equal to 3/5. So our final answer, now that we know the value of a and the value of omega, is y is equal to -2 times the sine of 3/5 times x. All right, guys, good luck.